Hi, everybody. I'm Barry Rosen. You are kind of, it's an integration class for my Varga 1 class. It's the first class of my new class on Varga 2s, and we have a number of guests today and people that will be watching it on videotape. As you know, people often sign up for these promos and then come, uh, and watch the videotapes when they have time. I usually kind of hide behind the curtain because I have to keep so many things on my screen. And if I'm looking at myself, it's just too much. So if I become the wizard of the screen, you'll understand. I usually start with some chanting. What we're going to do today is we're going to specifically give an overview of the Varga 2 class and some of the Vargas that we're going to study there. And then we're also going to have some new knowledge on how the sun, the moon, and the Atmakaraka show up in the Varga charts and kind of what they mean and some of the techniques for looking at that in a general way. So if you don't know too much about Varga charts, we'll try to teach you a little bit. I had suggested I have another introductory talk on Varga charts that's on YouTube. I sent a link to it. Hopefully many of you watch it. I'm going to review a few of those points, but actually the point of this talk is to do some new points and to kind of give an overview of the Vargas that we're going to cover in that chart. Vargas is a word meaning divisional charts, and it's the way that we divide things in a subtle way. So I'm going to first I will unmute people who are actually, I will unmute the microphones at some point so that you can ask questions. For now, I'm just going to kind of go into my chanting. Here's my contact information. For those of you who want to reach me, Barry at appliedvedicastrology.com. I do respond to email quite quickly. You can also text me on Facebook through Barry Rosen. Most of you know me from my columns on Facebook, either Barry Rosen, Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, Vedic Astrology Classes by Barry Rosen. And I also respond to Skype. I have an office number, and that is listed here also for those of you who need that. I'll leave that up for a minute. So this talk is going to be about 2 hours. My format is to kind of stop and do questions. When I need to pause my voice. Hard for me to kind of monitor questions during the talk because there's just a lot going on. So I will look up for questions. You can type questions in on the chat box, but and then people who are my students, I will unmute you so that you can ask questions at some point too, and we can do that. So I usually start my classes with some chanting, so you can just sit quietly. And the purpose of the chanting is it quiets the mind down and makes it more sattvic so that we can receive knowledge. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samabraha, Nirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Jnanamulam Guru Murtim, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vidvishai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Somaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Vischa Rahuve Ketave Namaha. So honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Goddess of Wisdom, Vedavyasa, writer and cognizer of the Vedas, and the holy tradition that I'm most connected to through Brahmananda Saraswati. And I stand on the shoulders of many great teachers, particularly honoring my Jyotish teachers, Sanjay Roth, Camille Sutton, and Bill Levacy, although I have many. I want to welcome Jamie Bateman, who's my assistant. She's been helping me edit my books, and I'm going to unmute her. Jamie, do you want to introduce me a little bit and say something about my work?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. Welcome today. I've had the privilege of being one of Barry's students for the last couple of years and then working with him as well. We've been working together on Barry's book. He just released Finding Your Blind Spots about a month ago, and then we're also working on the upcoming transit book for 2019 and 2020. And it's just been really great. I have been a student of astrology. Well, I've been interested in it for ever since I was little, and just trying to learn things from a Western perspective, and even looking at Chinese astrology. And I've had a lot of questions, and I consider myself a spiritual teacher, or seeker. Now I'm not teaching, but um, I had a lot of questions, and I've been, searching for answers to things about my career and my life and why things weren't happening for me, and um, experiencing a lot of blocks financially. And I have a virtual side business that I was struggling with, or I'd find, certain spots that would just kind of explode and boom, and then all of a sudden I'd tank, or just experiencing relationship problems. And I was finding that this was just occurring, time and time again, and I couldn't understand why. And so I went through a lot of different paths and wasn't finding answers. And so I thought there's got to be something out there that can help me. And I turned to astrology. And of course, the path that I was most familiar with was Western. And I wasn't finding what I needed there. Started doing some transcendental meditation, found out about Vedic astrology, and as um, synchronicity would have it, um, I got in touch with Barry and started following his blogs on Facebook, and eventually became a student. And I've been just kind of plugging along with him for the past couple of years. And I just wanted to pop in and just give him a plug here, because Barry thinks outside the box. It's not just your mainstream. This is the zodiac, and these are the 12 signs, and these are all of the houses, and these are the planets, and this is what they mean, and they're just main significations. I mean, Barry really has been studying this for over, I believe for over 30 years, and he continues to study, and it's a passion of his, and I could tell that from the start. And so it kind of caught my attention, and I realized that it wasn't just mundane stuff. And I'm a deep diver too, and I needed more than what I was finding. And when I stumbled upon his classes, it just kind of really spoke to me, because it helped me figure out from my own chart where my blocks were, and why I wasn't seeking and getting the results in my own life, of what I was expecting. And so a lot of that I've been able to clear, and just working with him and talking to him. And Barry's really personal, and he knows the students, and he knows his stuff, and he's been doing this for so long, and he integrates other principles too, which I really liked, and has helped with just color work and herbs, and timing, and transit events. And you're not just looking at one thing. But I also like his cookbook approach too, so it made it easy for me to understand, because I've attended other classes that wasn't helping, because it was too far over my head. So what I really appreciate, and I wanted to say about Barry's classes that I've been following along with, is it's it's accessible, the information to me, and I could understand, and I felt comfortable about approaching him and asking questions, and he's available. One of the things when I first got to know Barry and his classes was I wasn't able to attend live, and he would even just check in with me from time to time, by sending a personal note, and I was really surprised by that, because you usually approach this class, and then that's it. Your teacher, your professor, it's like a ghost out there. And Barry's a real person, and if I had questions, I could reach out, and he even offered. He's like, hey, hop on the phone with you for 15 minutes or whatever if you have questions. How are you doing, Jamie? Are you enjoying the classes? And I was like, wow, this is great. There's a human being out there who actually cares, about my learning too. So I would just encourage, if you have questions or, ask, enjoy the classes. It's about your life too, and uh, really finding out, where your blocks are. But Barry's been able to help me work around, like I said, my own blocks and understand what, yag-yags are, and, where's the weak points in my chart, and what can I do about that, and how can I strengthen those areas so I can work with those points in my chart rather than work against them and work against myself. And so it's been quite the journey, and I'm looking forward to continuing along. And I've taken some of his classes, even twice, because he continues to find, more information, and he updates it and upgrades. And like I said, he goes outside the box too, and finds stuff that others aren't teaching and talking about, or they're not willing to talk about because maybe, they think it's taboo, or it might reflect karmically on them or something. And Barry's not afraid to go out there and stretch, and I love that about him. So I just want to say you're in a great place. So share, and there's a lot of good students here too. It's great to connect with people, and I just wanted to come on and talk a little bit about Barry and what he does, and how he's helped me, and how much I appreciate him, and all the work that he puts into these classes, because he does pour his whole heart in and spends a lot of extra time outside of just, a couple of hours each week on teaching. So thank you, Barry. I do appreciate everything that you do. And I'm really looking forward to the Varga 2 class and learning more about all of the charts, and just diving deep into Deutsches, because there's so much to learn. It is a vast ocean, and you make it, enjoyable and exciting. And I feel like I can actually understand it and grasp it. So, thanks for doing the hard work for us, and doing all your research and pulling it all together into something that we can actually, understand, because I know Sanskrit is not easy, and trying to understand Prashna is difficult enough, and all the sources out there, and somehow you're able to manage to kind of bring it all together so we can get a grasp on it, so we can be our best, highest selves. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. So what before we start today's talk, again, many people will be watching this tape on video when they have time later in the week. Actually, about 51 people signed up to see the video, and we've got about 14 people here. Most of them are from my classes. Quick plug for my book, Finding Your Blind Spots. It's on Amazon. It's on my website. One of the interesting things about books is it's kind of, I didn't write it to make money. I mean, it's all about sharing knowledge, and there's a lot of depth in my book. So if we want to, I encourage you to pick them up. New Transit Guide is also coming out this week. At least the first part of it should be out this week. And many of you have seen my transit book from last year, and this one is we're putting new articles in it, so it's going to be great. Next Saturday, I am being hosted by Cosmic Insights to do a webinar on Vedic financial astrology, and I'm going to focus mainly on remedies. That there is a cost for that. For those of you who are interested in it, you can go to cosmicinsights.com website to sign up, and it's a 2.5 hour talk. There is a free event also next Friday, which you can sign up for. Going to be a guest panelist with Sam Jevi and Pandit Samavedala, and another lady who I don't know, on talking about this year's 2019 transits. It's going to be a 4-hour event starting 11 a.m. Eastern time. and Kishanakti is hosting it. Most of you get my newsletter. There's a URL on the front page of the newsletter how to sign up for it for free, and I think the URL is here also. Um, okay, I'm not going to go into any of this other stuff now. Let's get to our talk. Okay, this is like the summary course for my Varga 1 class, and so those people are here in I'm calling the Varga 2 class the subtle Varga charts, and we'll see why in a minute. We are going to finish up with some of the more what I would call physical Vargas, like but we do need to the Varga. Most of the Vargas in this chart are more kind of subtle. They deal with the kind of mental levels of the body and the subtle bodies, and they're kind of interesting. We'll learn about that in a minute. I am going to, given the audience that's here, I'm going to, I just unmuted, well, actually, let's see. I'm going to unmute you, although it's, and then you can unmute, you can mute yourself. That's you have control of your microphone. So you have to turn your microphone from green to red so that the noise in your home doesn't bleed into the tape. But I've just all unmuted you. Most of you know how to do this. If you don't, Tejal, you need to kind of mute yourself. And Jackie, you need to mute yourself. If not, I'll support you and just mute yourself myself. So that's okay. So most of you, that gives you control of the mic when we have time to ask questions. So, okay, great. Okay. So again, I have to be kind of in an odd position. When you put hours into these courses and you make about $10 an hour, you still have to kind of promote them. But the first Varga class, for those of you who missed it, is available in its entirety now for $295. If you want to do smaller packages, you can get a package just covering the Navamsha chart, which has like 6 tapes plus 3 other tapes, 9 tapes, and also I'll talk about this at the end. But for those of you who want to come into the Varga 2 class, I can also set up payment plans for you. So again, I stand on the shoulders of many great teachers. For this talk, I want to acknowledge Camilla Sutton, G.K. Gohl, Hank Friedman, Sanjay Roth, and Zoran Restislovich. So Vargas, just for a few people who don't know too much about Vargas, and we have like another 50 people that can listen to the videotape. Varga chart analysis separates good astrologers from mediocre astrologers, because sometimes you'll look, if you've had a reading and somebody says something really good, you've got something really great in your chart and it's going to manifest, and it doesn't, it's probably because they didn't look real closely at a lot of subtle things in the chart. Varga charts allow us to read like strands of DNA and to see when things will manifest in detail. And that's, they really, when you really learn the details of Vedic astrology, you realize why some things just don't work, but the answers are always there. So quickly, I sent this out to you. If you haven't watched lesson 1 from my Varga 1 course, it's a kind of a review of the basic principles of looking at Varga charts. So we always look at the rising sign of a Varga chart and where the Lord is, and that's just the basic principle. So we want to know if the rising sign has a malefic planet in it, like Mars, Rahu, Saturn, or Ketu, that may create a subtle block, a karmic block in that area of life. So if you have, looking at the D10 chart, which governs career, let's say you put Saturn in the first house and Aries in the D10, it means that you're going to have a lot of blocks to your career. It will go very slowly. It will be it will be blocked. And your career chart may look good in your natal chart. When you look at the D chart and you see Saturn debilitated in the first house, then you suddenly understand why things aren't happening in your career. So that's one of the first things. And then if you don't have any planets in the first house in the D1 in the D charts, then you look at where the Lord of that chart is placed. So just to get specific, I'm going to have to use my Varga charts to be very specific. So my Dashamsha chart, um, my career chart is very strong actually, in some ways, because I've got lower of the 10th and the 5th in Pisces, and it's actually my sun is the strongest planet. So my career is very kind of well placed here in the main chart. In the Dashamsha chart, the D10 chart, it's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in the 7th house, with two benefics. And it's in the sign of Pisces, where it's a little bit debilitated. Now, this would suggest I would have trouble with business partnerships, which has been true. But because of the Venus cancellation with the exaltation, actually, my career is uplifted here in this chart. And the moon is also benefic. It's also helping it here in Pisces, a friendly sign. So that's one of the things that you kind of have to remember to look at. You can see what's going to happen in a specific Varga chart in terms of what's going on in that dasha period. Just this is a review for my other students too. There's a principle called Baba Suchika, and I'm going if you don't. This is going to review of material that people have gone through. So I'm in a Rahu period, and I'm in a Rahu period, and I'm in Rahu Mercury at the moment. So the nature of my career could be, in this particular period, could be judged from the Varga chart by looking at Rahu here in the 6th, which suggests challenges. We don't like planets in this 3rd, 6th, 8th, or 12th houses in the Varga charts. And career has been a little bit challenged, uplifted a little bit by good luck with Jupiter here. My Mercury period we've talked about that, but Rahu and Mercury are 2 houses from each other, and Rahu is in Sagittarius. It moves into Aquarius here, so it's moving 3 houses, and that's a three transposition, and threes cause challenges. So basically, my Mars period was extremely strong for my career. We've got Mars is in the 2nd house. Here it moves from Aries to Libra. Here it moves 7. So it did suggest a lot of business partnerships, which actually were fruitful. But my Rahu period has brought a lot of obstacles in my career, and you can see it in the Dashamsha chart. Okay. So basically, when you have planets in the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and the 12th house, they're going to cause problems in their dasha periods. And just this is a reminder: we don't use aspects in Varga charts because it's the way they're divided up. We can't use traditional aspects in Varga charts. There's some exceptions to that, which we've studied in the Varga 1 class. We can use Rashi Drishti from Jaimini astrology, and that means the dual signs aspect each other and things like that. But can't go into all those details; I'll overwhelm you. And then we always look at the Karaka in the Varga chart. So if you're looking at children, you're looking at the 5th house. In the Varga chart, you're looking at Jupiter, which is the Karaka for children, and to see where Jupiter is. And we had a bunch of cookbooks for going through Vargas, but okay, so let's keep moving on. So the Varga charts are divided up by the elements. So the more physical elements, we can actually, I didn't have D9 here, but actually D9 and D12 would also be included here, but so the more physical Varga charts are D1 through D12. They deal with our physical world more. So the D4 chart is about property and our homes and inheritance. The D7 is about our children. The D9 is about marriage. The D12 is about our parents. The D3 is about siblings and more of our physical energies. The D2 is about wealth. So the early Varga charts deal with the physicality. As we move into the higher Varga charts, which I'm just, we're dealing more with mental energy, with the water element. So D16, D20, D24 all deal with kind of mental energies. And we'll talk about those and give an overview of that in a minute. These are things that we're going to study this winter. The D27 element is connected to this, the fire element, to this super consciousness. And the D27 and the D30 chart these are kind of more subtle levels of the body. They're more kind of astral karmas. The D45 and D40 chart deal with the air element. They're connected to ancestral karma. Actually, all the lineage of our grandparents and great grandparents and great great parents are contained in these subtle charts. And I'm actually going to combine a couple lessons where we look at the D12 chart, which is about parents, with the D40 and D45 chart, which is about ancestral karma. I'm very interested in ancestral karma because we find the Vedic lineage is very kind of interested in honoring our ancestors, and even though they've passed, they're kind of there and they impact us, and things that they've done kind of impact us, and their support is also there for us, and they have holidays to honor the ancestors, and it's very important to understand ancestral karma because it impacts our lives, and it's something I've done a lot of work on the last couple of years, and sometimes you find out that even the things that you're going through are not even connected to what you've done in this life. It's just because your grandparents did certain things. I had a client whose parents actually were very involved in genocide in the Pakistani Indian War in 1948, and a lot of her life was blocked in many ways because there were a lot of angry souls that had been killed by her parents in a very kind of difficult situation during the Indian-Pakistani War, and we had to have a Vedic pundit do a lot of ceremonies to kind of release all this energy so that her life could move forward, and it did. So we're very connected to our ancestors, whether we like it or not, genetically and karmically, and in many different ways. The D60 chart, which we've studied in Varga 1 class, is about the space element, and it's the more subtle levels of the Vargas, and it's one of the most powerful charts. We had a wonderful time discussing it. We will not get to do it again, but it's available in our Varga 1 class. The D60 chart is about past lives and shows all the accumulated karma. It's quite fascinating. Now, in this class that's coming up, now I should mention that for those of you who are on tape, watching us on tape or live here and have not taken our first class, you can step into Varga 2 class by just watching 3 tapes. There's 3, and this tape also. There's 3 basic tapes on how to do Vargas, and one of them is free on YouTube, which I've sent you a link for to listen to. There's 2 more included in the first set that are very important. And if you're interested in stepping into the Varga 2 class, you can just watch those 3 tapes, and you're watching this one now, and you can enter, because we're studying different things. In Varga 1 class, we studied the Navamsha, which in great detail, because it's very important for everything. We studied the D60 because it's a very important chart. We studied D4 and D7. D7 is for children, but a lot of these charts are kind of self-sufficient in their own, so you don't have to have studied all the other charts that we studied in Varga 1 to step into this class. You do have to review 2 or 3 tapes. So if you're interested in coming into this live class, there will be an opportunity for that. So in this class, we're going to study the Drekana, which originally was scheduled for Varga 1, and then we moved it here. And Drekana divides the chart into 3 equal parts of 10 degrees, and the Western astrologers call that decantes. And they tell us something about personality. They're very useful for medical astrology. That, to me, is the most interesting thing about them, and we'll spend probably an hour and a half looking at that. It's one of my passions. They also can tell us about third house affairs like courage, siblings, short travels, and mental thoughts and processes of an individual. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of Drekana charts, and they're calculated differently. And there's one called Samanath Drekana, which we'll look at, which tells us about sexual inclinations. And third house is a very sexual house, and it connects to Matuna, which means connected to Gemini, which in Vedic astrology in Sanskrit means Mituna, which means copulation. So third house has a very kind of primal energy to it. It's about aggression and it's governed by Mars. And there's a lot of sexual energy in the third house. It's quite, and the Drekana can show us about that. There's another type of Drekana chart called the Varnasi Drekana chart that reveals past karmas and fruits of karmas. And there's an important element that we always have to look at in anybody's chart, which is called the 22nd Drekana, which can reveal deep malefic karma when it will manifest. And people are always kind of scared of these things, but it's good to know about them and when they're going to manifest, what you can do about them. And so we'll look at that in the Drekanas. The D2 chart, which we didn't get to, is the Hora chart, and it refers to wealth. And there are 4 or 5 also Hora charts. Some of them, when you pull up the Hora chart, which is the Parashara one, it kind of doesn't make sense because basically the way it's calculated, all the planets go into Leo or Cancer, and you know, I was always puzzled by this when I first looked at it because, you know, what do you do with this? How do you calculate somebody's wealth from that? You know, these are kind of actually, you know, tell us more about our solar and lunar energies. You know, we come from our father and our mother. Our solar and lunar energies are masculine and feminine energies, kind of embody our energies, and the way the planets distribute in our masculine and feminine energies kind of reveal something about the personality. And they also there are all kinds of techniques for dealing with this, and it's kind of fascinating. But there are other Hora charts that actually are more specific about wealth, and Sri Jyoti allows you to just kind of click and kind of look at them, and we'll take a look at all of those also. But they're kind of interesting. But this is the one that most charts pull up, and we don't know what to do with it. We probably could spend 2 lessons on Hora. We may need to because there's so many interesting things to do with it. The Dwada Shamsa chart is the D12 is connected to our parents, and I think I'm going to lump it together with the D40 and the D45 because it's all about parents and ancestors, and I think we all have to kind of study that together. We can look at inheritances in there. We can see the qualities of our parents in there. It turns out, and this is kind of odd, the planet that's in the D12, if Venus is stronger than the sun, then it represents the father in the D12. If the sun is stronger than Venus, then you look at that as the Karaka. And in the moon, the other Karaka for mother is Mars, which, you know, to me is kind of mind-boggling. But it's one of those kind of funny things in Vedic astrology. So in the D12, we have to look at Moon or Mars to see which one is stronger, to see how to represent the mother. We can use these charts to predict the death of parents, to look at lineage, and we can resolve ancestra and inherited karma by looking at this area. And again, I'm kind of fascinated about this. We'll probably spend 2 lessons talking about ancestral karma, looking at parents and ancestors. The Shoda Shamsa chart, that's the D16 chart. This is where we start moving into the mental bodies. And the D16 is 4 times 4. So it's connected to the 4th house, which is the house of the mind, and the house of happiness, and the house of vehicles. Now, maybe that's why if you watch the latest Honda commercial, they have people like ecstatic in ecstasy because they got this incredible offer on their Honda at their Honda dealer, and they go into this rapturous energy. Is why that commercial probably works, because, you know, vehicles, I guess, give us happiness. But you can just look at the D16 chart to look at your vehicle karma, maybe to see thefts and accidents connected to vehicle. But, you know, if you get to know me in my classes, I'm always more interested in psychology and spirituality, and the mental energies of the moon are in the D16 chart. So it turns out that the 16 phases of the moon, from total darkness, which is the new moon, Amavasya, to the brightness of the full moon, which is called the Purnima moon, are connected to the 16 divisions of the Shoda Shamsa chart, and to the 16 tithis, or the lunar days, and their deities connected to each one of them. And so they're quite they're quite interesting, and they show us mental endurance and mental patience, and they can show us the mirage of sensual activity that can lead us to humiliation and unhappiness. They also tell us a lot about our luxury karma, which if we have nice things, if we have nice homes, if we have nice vehicles, and to me that's more of a superficial aspect of it. Hopefully I'll spend more time on the deities and the 16 areas of the mind. The D20 chart is one of my favorites. It's called Vimshamsha. It's connected to our spiritual inclinations and blocks to spiritual practice. In the trinal halls, this becomes very important here, first, fifth, and ninth. The sixth house in the D20 shows us our blocks on the spiritual path. The ninth house tells us about our relationship with our guru, and the fifth house may show us the deity that we need to worship to achieve spiritual progress. I'll just show you my D20 chart, which is actually one of my better Varga charts. So first of all, it's Taurus rising. I mean, I've got Northern India style here. I usually use Southern in the classes, but I've got Venus and Taurus here with an exalted moon. So obviously there's a lot of dignity in this chart. I actually have been a very spiritual being my whole life, and my whole interest has been moksha. And I never, until I studied Varga charts, I didn't really understand. In my Rashi chart, I've got Lord of the Ninth, the Moon in the first house here. It's not a particularly spiritual chart here. I mean, Sun in the fifth is actually very spiritual. But if you were just to look at my Rashi chart, you wouldn't say this was a very spiritual chart. When you go to the Vimshamsha chart, you've got Venus in its own sign. And Venus, Taurus is very connected to Krishna, and I think I always have been very connected to Krishna. The moon here is very, is exalted here, suggesting I have a lot of bhakti and devotional energy. Sun in the fifth house here is going to connect me to Shiva, and then Jupiter and Ketu here in Capricorn here are about gurus. Now Jupiter in the ninth is very powerful. I've had very powerful gurus in my life. Jupiter Ketu creates deep devotion to gurus. Rahu can create rebellion toward gurus, and that has happened in my life. So D20 chart is kind of a fascinating chart to look at your spiritual life at. D24 chart, which we're going to study, is about education, higher education, sports, language, professional studies, academic achievement, and breaks in education. It does come up, people who are going to college and parents asking you about their college, what's going on with my kid's college. Sometimes you need to look at this. I don't use this chart too much, but we will spend a little time on it. We'll probably only spend an hour on it because, I think we need more time on some of the other charts. And so some of the other mental charts which are connected to the fire element are the D27 chart, which is sometimes also called the Nakshatra Amsha chart. And it's kind of nakshatras within nakshatras. It reveals hidden strengths of the mind and spirituality of a person. Now, so what's really interesting here is that because it's obviously there are 27 nakshatras, and if you divide the sign into 27 parts, you get kind of nakshatras within nakshatras. Now, people are going on the web talking about nakshatras and the vamshas, which is not something that really exists, and I don't quite know where people are getting that. But if you really want to study nakshatras within nakshatras, you look at the D27 chart. And so, for example, my ascendant, which is Anuradha nakshatra, which is connected to spiritual friendship and the goddess Mitra, and very much into spiritual networking, which really describes what my life is about. On a deep level, it's connected to Shatabhishak nakshatra in the D7 chart. So it creates a deep fascination. Shatabhishak nakshatra is connected to Varuna and healing. It's the nakshatra of 100 physicians. So there's for those of you who know me well, I'm very, very involved. I've been very involved in healing for 40 years, although I'm not a medical doctor. But that connection with Shatabhishak on the very deep level of the nakshatra is creating a kind of a deep interest in healing in my life, and so it's very revealing of my orientation in my mental life. The D30 chart often scares people. It's called the chart of misfortunes, and it's connected to the five elements, to the senses, and to the problems we experience through the five senses. So Mars is connected to the fire element, to sight. Saturn is connected to the air element, which is connected to touch. Jupiter is connected to the ether element, which is connected to hearing. Mercury is connected to the earth element, which is connected to smell, and Venus is connected to the water element, which is connected to speech. This chart reveals our misfortunes in life and bad luck, and these misfortunes can be timely natural disasters, professional falls, accidents, family property disputes, and all those ugly things that we don't want to happen in our life. But they are here in the T30 if you want to find them. We should not get in the habit of looking for the worst in our life. Usually there's some Jupiter connection or some Venus connection or some benefic connection, or some really positive connection that's hidden in the chart that kind of would, block some major disaster. And sometimes we have major disasters in our life, and they force us to move into major changes in our life, which are very positive, and we wouldn't be the same person if we were. And I always told the story to my students of, in 1982, 83, actually, I developed kidney stones, and I had one every month, and the doctor said I was going to be in pain the rest of my life, and there was nothing they can do. And it forced me, it was a major calamity in my life at the time, and it forced me to study alternative medicine, brought out that Chhatabishak energy I was talking about, and it forced me to be, to really develop into kind of a healer, and stuff like that. The D30 also can show our moral character, and it's connected to the Shadrupas, our six weaknesses: anger, greed, intoxication, lust, jealousy, and illusion. These are the things that kind of block us. So I think analyzing the D30 chart is quite fascinating because you can see your mental weaknesses, where they're going to show up, and what you need to be aware of to kind of prevent kind of these blocks, and problems to kind of come up. So D30 is quite fascinating in that respect. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the new Vargas that we'll be studying in this second Varga class. And again, for those of you who haven't, the first Varga class focused on the Navamsha class, the D10 chart, and the D4 chart for property, and the D7 chart for children, and it looked at the D60 chart because it's such an important chart. You can just kind of jump into this class if you have some experience with Vargas, or if you can just catch up and watch 2 or 3 of my videotapes that cover the basic principles, and you'll be able to kind of pick it up. So I just wanted to kind of show you what is going to be covered in this class. So getting back to basic rules of review and synthesis in this class, we always connect the D1 chart to the D charts, and we can never just look at the Varga chart separately. Maybe the exception might be the D60 chart, which we talked about. You can read the D60 chart completely separately as a standalone chart, but that's one of the only exceptions. You always have to go back and forth from the D1 chart to the other Varga charts. If something is not promised in the D1 chart and it is promised in the Varga charts, usually there'll be hope for it to manifest, but it won't manifest. It has to be in the Rashi chart. So everything starts from the Rashi chart. If children are not promised in the D1 chart and they're all over and strongly placed in the D7 chart, you're still not going to manifest children. There'll be a lot of hope for having children, but it won't manifest. So in the same way, sometimes if things are weak in the D charts, and if things are strong in the D charts, and you think you're going to manifest something, and there's all kinds of blocks in the D charts, then again, there's promise for something happening, but it may not manifest. So you have to kind of always look at the two together. And we're going to develop some more, maybe even next week, we're going to kind of do a more solid review of cookbooks of how to kind of go from one chart to the next chart, so that you get in the habit of always using your cookbooks and your recipes to examine any D charts. So if we're looking at the fifth house or the ninth house for children, we always have to look at the D7 chart to see, are they really going to manifest? If we're looking at property, which is usually connected to Mars for landed property, or K2 for like apartment buildings, and then we're looking at um, the fourth house for property, for home, we always have to look at the D4 chart to see what kind of karma is going to manifest in there. If we're looking at the mind for the fourth house, which is, if you've taken my Secrets of the Houses course, so much we have to do with the fourth house and the mind and the influences on the fourth house. We also have to look at the D16 chart to see how what's going on in the mind in the D16 chart. If we're looking at higher education, we're looking at the ninth house in the Rashi one. Then we have to go to the D24 and see if there are blocks to higher education. My D24 chart is kind of interesting. I have my ninth house lord, the moon, is strong, as Digbala is strongly placed here in the fourth house here. So I have like 16 years of college, and I have 3 or 4 degrees, and just kind of a college junkie. So I have a stationary Jupiter as connected to higher education aspecting my fourth house also. But there have been times and interruptions in my career chart, and you see kind of Saturn here in the sixth house, and so and Sun in the eighth house. It turns out if you're going to have blocks to education, you look at the eighth house in the D24 chart to see when and when they're going to manifest. There were times when I just had to drop out of my PhD program because I was in my Saturn return crisis, and I have had blocks along the way in education, but I ended up triumphing because of many strong features in my chart. If we want to look at health and enemies connected to the sixth house, we have to look at the D30 chart, because the sixth house is very, very much key in the D30 chart. So we always have to go back and forth between the first house, the D1 chart, and the Varga charts. So here are some of the basic steps. This was some new material and integration material that I wanted to present at the end of my Varga 1 class and for my Varga 2 students. And we started going over it last week. So one of the first things that we can look at is we can look at the Lagna Lord of the Rashi and all of the Varga charts to see where there's strength and weaknesses. So we're looking, one of the things that we always look at in the Varga charts is we look at dignity. Exalted planets make things 3 times as easy to get done. Debilitated planets make things a struggle, and maybe you have to work 3 times as hard to happen. In between, you get own sign, Lilitrikuna, neutral sign, enemy sign. It tells you something. So where the chart lord is placed in all the Varga charts, it's going to tell you something about the health and status of how planets are impacted in the divisional chart. So take, for example, if the Lagna Lord is exalted in the D7 chart, so let's say you're Sag-rising and you've got Jupiter, which is also the Karaka for children. Let's say it's placed in Cancer in the D7 chart. Then when you give birth to a child, it will elevate your status and health after birth. And if it's weak, and maybe you have a crisis around health. Sometimes mothers give birth to a child and they spend a year recovering their health. And you can see that in the Varga chart just based on where the Lagna Lord. The Lagna Lord is always connected to our intelligence and our physical health. And if it's in the D chart, if it's strong, it's going to increase something in that chart. If it's weak, it's going to hurt something. I want to do some examples. I'm going to take some people from my students in the chart. Afi, I'm going to I just unmuted you, so you can come on. Let's take a look at your let's look at this principle in your chart. So So one of the things that you can do quickly, and I'm going to cheat here because I've got the software, and it's nice to have good software. Um, is you can look at now obvious saturizing, although I don't have that here. This is so we could quickly go down and look at where all of Offie's Jupiter are placed in all her charts. So she's got Jupiter in her chart lord is in Gemini. Um, and in her horror chart, she's got it in Leo. In Draconon chart, she's got it and it's telling you in the column here. It's neutral. It's a great enemy. It's in a own sign. It's in debilitation sign. It's so you can to quickly look and see if we wanted to look at Trimshamsha, which is a place where we worry about misfortunes. Her ascendant lord is okay. Her ascendant lord is strong, by dignity, and it's in a good house. It's in the seventh house in the Trimshamsha chart. So naturally, the chart lord being strong in the Trimshamsha chart is going to kind of protect her against a lot of misfortune. So that's how we might kind of interpret that quickly. So you can always, one of the things you want to do is just look at where your ascendant lord is in all the charts, what kind of dignity it has, and then you could look at individual placement. In her Navamsha chart, he's got Jupiter in the 11th house, and so maybe in a sub period of Jupiter there might be a chance for a relationship, but we have to see if relationship is blocked in the Rashi chart. I should put the Rashi chart up here. So here's your Rashi chart, which is D1, and relationship should be kind of important for her because the chart lord is in the seventh house. The seventh house can also be business relationship. It is in an enemy sign of Gemini, and for those of you who've taken my blind spots class, there's a kind of a Boudica influence. So there's some problems with relationship in the chart. In the Navamsha chart, Jupiter goes into the 11th in an enemy sign here also. But we have to kind of look at some other things here also. But I just wanted to kind of show this kind of principle. Thank you, Afi. I'm going to I don't want to go into detail analyzing things now because I have a lot of material to cover. So basically, do a quick survey of where your chart lord goes in all your Varga charts and see if there's what houses they go into in the Varga charts. Again, we don't want things in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, 8th, or 12th houses in the Varga charts. And we want some dignity, and then that will show you whether that event will lift up your health and your status. What happens? So, for example, I think in my chart, let's see. I have kind of a weird chart because I'm ruled by K2 and Mars. And K2 is an Aquarius here in my Siddhamsha chart. And Mars is in Scorpio in its own sign here. I'm just trying to kind of make these principles more concrete. Let's put in the D24 here. So I got very sick in college, and so when I went to actually when I first started my first year at college, I developed I got very sick, and I also got very sick in graduate school, and so we should think that K2, K2 in Aquarius here in the second house, which is kind of a bad health house. It's not supporting health when I go to college. And even Mars has some dignity here, but it's also afflicted by Mercury here. And the 11th house is also kind of a health house because it's 6 from the 6th. So we sense that my health was and my status was kind of hurt when I went to college, and you can kind of see it a little bit by the dignity of the ascendant lord here, and that's the principle I was just trying to kind of show. I know it definitely was there in my experience, but that's one advanced rule of this principle. So I just illustrated that. So debilitated in a Varga chart, then when that area of life happens, you may fall in status or health. I wouldn't say it was debilitated. In my case, it was afflicted. So you don't want the Lagna Lord in the D1 in any of the D charts very afflicted by one or more malefics because it may cause great suffering in that area of life. And again, if it has conjunct a number of benefics, then it gets lifted up and has the opposite effect. Here's an example. If you have Taurus rising with if you have Taurus rising with Venus in the D10 chart, and is conjunct Rahu and Saturn, then it may create major problems in career. So look at the Lagna Lord in a Varga chart. If it's conjunct 2 or more malefics, it may create suffering in that area of life. So the Lagna Lord, you want to trace through all the divisional charts, and we'll have to practice this on my students maybe next week. And you can do it. I suggested you do it for homework. Now, the other thing you can look at is you look at the favorable and unfavorable positions of the Lagna Lord in divisional charts. So you want to, one of the things you can always look at the quality of the sign, and I've mentioned to you before. I used to think signs weren't important, but signs give you very microscopic information. Aquarius, anything that has Aquarius and Scorpio shows past life suffering. Scorpio is connected to Ketu. Aquarius is connected to Rahu, and it tends to kind of take away things. So you don't want your Rashi Lord in Aquarius or Scorpio in the Varga charts. If you have it connected to Taurus or Libra, it brings material wealth connected to that Varga. So you can tell a lot by sign placement. Pisces is going to bring blessings of Saraswati. Capricorn brings hard work. This is in my books. I put it in the slideshow, which I'll send to people if they want to see it. These are all the Shaktis of the signs. Aries is connected with creativity. Taurus with material wealth. Gemini needs to be creative, or otherwise that creative energy goes into sexuality and gets us into trouble. Cancer has the Shakti and the blessings of Gauri and Mother Divine, and it shows blessings of women when you have that showing up in a Varga chart. Blessings of the mother, women become good luck things for you. So Cancer is a very auspicious sign in the Varga chart. Leo is connected to Lord Shiva, and it brings our hidden talents out. Virgo causes problems. Virgo is the natural 6th house of the zodiac. 6th house is about discipline and regular work and health to prevent illness. And whenever we have Virgo in a Varga chart, it causes challenges. We tend to kind of beat ourselves up, be too self-deprecative, and be too perfectionistic. So you have to remember to translate the science that the ascendant lord goes in the Varga chart into more meaningful information. Libra brings material blessings of Lakshmi, so it can be very powerful for artistic creativity and sexual energy. Also, Scorpio, as I said, brings deep karmic suffering from the past. Sagittarius is about learning Dharma and learning getting. It's all Sagittarius is the is the fundamentalist sign of the zodiac, where religious dogma can take over. When we get religious terrorists, sometimes they have an afflicted Sagittarius or an afflicted Jupiter in the chart, because when Jupiter gets afflicted and Sagittarius gets afflicted, people get too dogmatic and stuck in this is the only way. And so the curse of Sagittarius is that it gets too fundamentalistic, but it also it's the one sign of the zodiac that's connected to war. It's the one, the symbol of Sagittarius is, is the archer. And so the U.S. being a Sagittarius-run country is very connected to being very militaristic by nature, because Sagittarius likes to push its fundamental values, in this case U.S. democracy, impose it on the rest of the world with military interventionism. Very kind of powerful. So Sagittarius can, it's still a Jupiter sign. To me, it has this kind of real kind of doshic problem with it. Capricorn is always about hard work. Just remember, when we see Capricorn, it's about hard work, and it's pain and suffering because we have to work really hard. It's one of the more difficult signs. Aquarius, again, has a lot of deep karma with it because it's connected to Rahu and the seat of desire, and Rahu gives and it takes away. And Aquarius is opposite from Leo, and Leo is the giver of light. The sun gives light, and Aquarius is the darkness, and it takes it away. And so there's always kind of more pain and suffering in Aquarius, and yet, Aquarians, if they get through their suffering, they become great humanitarian beings and very deep devotees. But it's a lot of deep suffering always connected with Aquarius. Pisces is connected to Goddess Saraswati, wisdom and knowledge. You want to have Pisces in a Varga chart. Now, because it's connected to Jupiter and the wisdom of knowledge. So just you can reread that article. It's in both of my books. And I just wanted to go over it again because whenever you're looking at signs in a Varga chart, you kind of want to remember these kind of memorize these key words, because Sagittarius, belief in dogma, dharma, Scorpio, deep suffering from the past connected to Ketu, Cancer connected to the blessings of the mother and blessings of women. So you want to kind of remember the Shakti of the signs because it gives you more information about how it will manifest. Now, whenever in general in a Varga chart, you don't want certain planets together. You don't like Sun and Moon together because Sun and Moon is like a new moon, and whenever you meet people with a new moon, they're kind of emotionally dry and they kind of often lack confidence. So new moons, people born with new moons are often have very difficult lives because and if you talk to them, both usually their mother and their father were not there for them, and depending on the dignity, there are exceptions. Certainly Aries or Taurus new moons are going to be a whole lot better, but there's always a lot of suffering with new moons. And you don't want new moons, Sun conjunct Moon in a Varga chart. You don't want Sun conjunct Rahu in a Varga chart anywhere because it's eclipse fame, fear of failure, lack of appreciation around success. So those are kind of energies that manifest. You don't want Moon conjunct Mars in a chart. Now, traditionally this is related to celibacy. On an emotional level, it's connected to charged emotions, emotional disturbances. Mars conjunct Ketu is also a difficult combination in the Varga chart. Ancestral anger and violence from past lives, frustration in expressing power, past life sibling karma. So these are things that you kind of want to watch for. Other unfavorable conjunctions in Varga charts: Mars and Rahu, inclination towards sexual passion, violence, power, hunger, and achievement. Mars and Rahu are never a good combination. You don't want them in your Varga charts conjunct. Mercury and Rahu together. Mercury and Rahu are kind of friends. They do actually get along together because Rahu responds to Mercury and creates sharp intellectual energy. So that's the positive of it. But if there's any affliction to it by Saturn or other planets, other malefics like Mars, it can create deep phobias and nervous disorders. Jupiter and Rahu are kind of a difficult thing to have together in a Varga chart. They create death-like experiences flowing of tradition and religious and spiritual experience. Rahu, in today's world, we like mavericks. We like people who leave their traditional spiritual religious orientation, In India, obviously, this is like the worst thing that can happen because people are very devout Hindus. And when their children have Jupiter conjunct Rahu in the chart and they go off and to find some new level of spirituality, the parents are devastated. But in modern society in the West, this is not as much a problem. It's still kind of a problem. You create rebellion against father too. Venus and Mars together, is a kind of a problem, an unfavorable conjunction in a Varga chart. It either creates too much sexual passion, and when you have too much sexual passion, it usually gets out of control, and there's a energetic loss of vitality. Again, we've talked about the ideal Martian character when he's in his full power as a good soldier. He needs to keep his pants up in order to have his energy to fight and win in battle. If he gets lost at the brothels overnight, he's gonna lose his prowess and maybe fall in battle. So that's why Mars and Venus are sometimes a problem together. In modern society, we don't. Mars does not have to go into battle that much, and so he can enjoy his sexual dalliance. And so I think in modern society, it's not as much a problem. Saturn and Rahu together in a Varga chart, double suffering and disease, striving towards asceticism. Saturn, Rahu are always kind of a problematic energy. Um, Rahu is phobias, and Saturn can accentuate fear, and Saturn and Rahu together just create way too much anxiety in a Varga chart. Saturn and Ketu together, conflict between practical work and spiritual escapism. It also somehow is connected to death. Saturn and Ketu, we've got Saturn and Ketu I've got a whole article in the Almanac about Saturn and Ketu. It's a huge event this year between March and in transit this year. So here's our dignity cookbook. We want to look for dignity in the Vargas. So again, the simple way to do that, if you have the software, you can just go, and look at dignity. And Parashara actually gave us all kinds of ways to score this. And to me, the scores don't. I don't ever teach this because, it doesn't help you when you're doing microscopic analysis. It's thought of if you have a high score, like my moon is very weak. It's got an 8.97, which is low. My Venus is actually very strong in all the Varga charts. It's got 13.50. And if you look at my Venus, Rashi chart, great friend, Hora chart, enemy, doesn't matter in the Hora. Drekina chart, own sign, Pisces exalted in the Shamsha chart, for career, parents, great enemies chart there. Vimshamsha for spirituality, I showed you that in the first house in its own Taurus in its own sign. Tadamsa chart for education, own sign Libra, Pisces exalted in the Trimshamsha chart. So I get a high score here when you go through all the Varga charts, and there are people who like to look at these high scores and they graph them, and you can see the graph here. So my Venus has a 13.5, so I gave it a 14. My Saturn has a high score. My Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter have lower scores. People who like to say you've got, this makes the planet overall more powerful. I personally think you have to kind of break it down, because if you're looking at children or something, in my Saptamsha chart, and I've got a debilitated moon here, and I've got a debilitated Mercury here, and I've got a debilitated Saturn here, there's three, there are kind of three strikes against children, just because I've got three debilitated planets here. So it doesn't matter if the overall score is good, and my sun has a good score, but how it affects an individual Varga is going to be different. So when you're looking your dignity cookbook, look for exalted, own sign, Mula Trikuna, neutral, enemy, debilitation. You can do this quickly in the tables. I don't want to go over this in too much detail because I want to get to some of the other things that are more interesting. But For my students, I will send the slides, and here's how you evaluate what it means in a Varga chart. So you can analyze dignity in the Varga chart, and we went through how to do that quickly. So the second point is you can analyze all the house lords from the Rashi chart in the divisional charts. So so look at the D. So if you want to look at the if you want to look at any house, let's say we look at the fourth house. So we could go. We always we learned in our 5 or 6 lessons on Navamsha that the Navamsha chart is really important. So you always go from the D1 to the Navamsha chart to see is there dignity in the Navamsha chart, and we always look at that. We learned that already, and that's kind of a review. But you can also we also have to remember what we learned about Bhava Suchika, which is house transposition, which means we always have to kind of judge whether something's going to manifest in the dasha period. We have to see how it moves. We don't like transpositions that are 3, 6, 8, or 12. Again, this is a review of lesson 3 for my Varga 1 students. And for those of you who are not watching the tape, we should just look at the. I'll just show you an example of this. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go to North India. Here's the South India chart. Here's the D9 chart. So I mentioned before my Jupiter period. I have Jupiter in Gemini here. It's in the 8th house. It's not a great placement. My Rahu Jupiter period was actually kind of pretty difficult in many ways, and it was not that long ago, and I do remember it pretty well. And if I were studying this Bhava Suchika principle, so Rahu and Jupiter are 7 houses away, which is not a horrible placement. We like sevens; they're okay to suggest partnerships or things like that. But in the Navamsha chart, Jupiter goes from Gemini to Taurus here. So it moves 12 houses. So anytime you get a Bhava Suchika transposition of 12, it means either you need to be involved in seva or service and charity work, which I ended up doing during that period, or you feel a lot of frustration in moving forward. And 12 houses is always like delays and obstacles and frustrations and losses and expenditures. And during my my Rahu Jupiter period, I had some surgery connected to Rahu in the 2nd house. I had a tumor in my neck, and I just moved from Sedona back to Iowa, and I didn't have a solid office. And it seemed like that whole Rahu Jupiter period was very frustrating in just trying to get out of the house and trying to move forward with my health, trying to move forward with my business. And you can kind of see it in the Bhava Suchika, Rahu and Jupiter are 12 houses apart, and in the Navamsha chart here, the Bhava Suchika moves 12 houses from Gemini to Taurus. So whenever you're evaluating a dasha period, now if I were just looking at the Rashi chart and say, oh, Rahu Jupiter, there's a 7 relationship, things should go well, but it wasn't an easy period because the Bhava Suchika in the D9 chart was not there. So we said always look at that. It's very important for judging success of a dasha. So whenever we're looking at any house in the D1 chart, so let's say we're looking at siblings or relationship with brothers, we always have to go to the D3 chart, the Direkna chart. So I will continue when I teach the Vargas in this class to give you supplemental material on the houses. Because if you don't understand the house well, you're not going to be able, the information that you get from the Varga chart is not going to be as useful. But so you have to understand, that house really well and the placements of that house. So I lost this chart. I had it up and I was going to show it to you. But here's an example of what we're talking about. So let's say you've got, and this is true in my chart. I've got Lord of the 10th and the 5th. But my Rashi chart is, when you look at it for children, we did this last week in my class. Okay, so you look at I'm a male, so we're looking at the 5th house. We've got, which is owned by Jupiter. Now Jupiter is in the 8th house, which is not so good, and it's conjuncted malefic. So right away, we're not thinking this is a great chart for children. Jupiter in the Karaka for children is also in the 8th house. It doesn't look good for children. We look at the D7 chart for children. Jupiter is conjunct 2 malefics, Rahu and the Sun. Karaka is not doing well. The 5th house for children is Gemini. Mercury is in the 1st in Aquarius, which is a karmic sign. So when we analyze it in detail, it's not really great for children. I wanted children, but it wasn't. The karma is definitely there. My wife and I got married late, and we couldn't have children. We thought about adopting, but currently no children here. In another chart that I was looking at, you have the 5th lord is in the 10th, which is a good placement. But when we go to the D9 chart, Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, and it's in the 7th. It's in the there's a market Karnakastana influence. I don't have that example. I'm sorry to talk about something I don't have a chart up for. But in any case, there's so many things we have to look at when we're evaluating these charts. And next we're going to try to put together a definitive cookbook so we can kind of practice going back and forth from Rashi chart to Varga chart to get real practice with that. So in the D9 chart, we learned we don't want debilitation in the D9 chart because it's an indication of bad luck and good fortune. It brings that planet down, that Karaka down. So Jupiter debilitated in the D9 chart may cause problems with children. Mercury debilitated in the D9 may create problems with uncles or relatives, which is the Karaka. Sun debilitated in the D9 may create problems with the father. Moon debilitated in the D9 may create problems with the mother. We don't want debilitated planets in the D9. They bring down the fortune of the Karaka involved. We talked about this a couple times already. We always want to go back and forth between the Rashi and the Varga chart. So if we're looking at mother, we're looking at the 4th house, we're looking at the moon, we're looking at what's going on in the D12 house for parents, and if there's some affliction to the moon and to the 12th lord in the D10, then we're kind of in trouble. Now I'll show you. I did have my mother had a very difficult life. Sometimes you're actually looking at the parents' karma in the D chart, and the relationship may be different. We'll have to look at parental. We did a little bit with parental children relationships. We'll have to do it again from a different perspective. But let's look at my D12 here. So here's my. We said we could look at either Moon or Mars here in the D12. Now, if we were looking at the Moon, the Moon's here in the 8th house with K2 and Saturn. It seems like the Karaka for mother, had deep karmic suffering, which my mom did. She had a very kind of difficult life. Her parents left. She was kind of not abandoned by her parents, but she was raised by her grandparents from the age of 2, and she didn't see her parents again until she was about 12 and 16. So she had a very kind of difficult life here. So if we're looking at the moon here, we're in trouble. If we're looking at my if we're looking at Mercury, which is in the fourth house, my chart it's debilitated conjunct Rahu and the Sun here. If we're looking at the fourth lord Saturn or Rahu, in this case probably Saturn or Rahu, we can just see that there's a lot of difficult karma for my mother here. If anything, because we have Mars and Scorpio here, the second indicator for mother here in this chart. My mom, was tough, and she kind of got through stuff. She worked really hard all her life, but she had a very kind of deep karmically suffering life, even if we use Mars as the Karaka here. So we always want to go back and forth between the two charts, and we'll have to practice that when we get to parents. The other thing that we can look at in all the Varga charts is that we can look at the sun and the moon and the Atmakaraka. So one of the reasons I put together this lesson and I'm opened it to the public, because there's simple things you can do with it. You can look at your ascendant lord in all the Varga charts to see where it shines and where it doesn't shine. And you can look at the sun and the moon and the Atmakaraka in all the Varga charts. So the sun rules the soul, and the sun will show the influence of different areas of life in our destiny, fortune, and wealth, and resources, and profession and status. So the sun in the Varga charts is very important. So if you have sun exalted in the D7, when you have a child, it may increase your wealth and status in the world. And that happens to people sometimes. Suddenly, they're nobody and they have a kid, and their boss gives them a raise at work because they had a kid, and everything goes right. So you can kind of pull up, for those of you who have Sri Jyoti Star, or you have to run your own program, you can look at your sun this is my chart. You can look at the sun in all the Varga charts. Again, my score is very good. It's 12. And so you see in the Rashi chart, sun's in a great friend sign. In the Hora chart, it's in a friend sign. Doesn't mean anything in the Hora chart. Drekana, it's in a great friend sign. D4 chart for property, it's neutral in Pisces. Saptamsha, it's for children, it's an enemy sign. No children. Navamsha, it's in Cancer, it's a neutral sign. Dashamsha, it's in Scorpio, which is a great friend sign. For parents, it's in Pisces. So we just look at the sun in all the Varga charts. And actually, my sun is very strong in all the Varga charts, with the exception of maybe the D27 chart here, and the D45 chart, which connects with my father. And so his father obviously had a lot of suffering. But what we can see here, the point that I want to make to you is that you can study the sun in all the Varga charts, and it will show you something about status, influence, and fortune in that area. And you want a strong sun in a lot of your Varga charts, because it will uplift that area of the Varga. Now, it turns out if the sun's debilitated in the D10, it's one of these exceptions. And don't ask me why. There's always these funny exceptions. But if you see a debilitated sun in the D10, it's actually a good thing. I kind of think those people end up working harder, sometimes debilitated planets, because they feel a lack of confidence with the debilitated sun. Maybe they work harder and they get ahead more. So sometimes we'll learn that in the transit class about debilitated planets. Sometimes your debilitated planets become your best friend because you work 3 times as hard to overcome the problems of them. So you don't want to see sun in a Scorpio or Aquarius in a Varga chart. Again, it suggests pain and loss and cruelty. If you're Leo rising or Sag rising, then you absolutely have to look at the sun in all the Varga charts. It becomes very, very important because it's the chart lord, and it's the 9th house lord for Sag rising. So Afi, you've got Sag rising, so definitely look at the sun in all your Varga charts. And we've looked at the exception. This was interesting. This is kind of a little bit of a side note, and I pulled it together because I was just thinking about it. When we have debilitated planets, there are remedies for them, and sometimes the remedies are basically the remedy is the karaka of the house that debilitates them. So if you have a weak sun, if you have Sun in Libra, now this could also be in a Varga chart, so this is why I put it in here. If you have Sun in Libra in any Varga chart, it can be compensated by a strong Venus. So if you get married, your weak Sun in a Varga chart can be pulled up. And I actually have a friend who's got a debilitated Sun in the 12th, and he did get married, and you could just see how his whole energy got lifted, and he became a different person when he got married. It totally lifted that debilitated Sun out of a very difficult placement in Libra and in the 12th house. Saturn conjunct the Sun in Libra. Now, normally you think that's a horrible combination because it creates fighting with bosses and just strains from work. But Saturn in Libra is always about very, very hard work, and so it can pull a debilitated Sun up and prevent him from perishing. Debilitated Moon, Moon is debilitated in Scorpio, so Mars is the sign of Scorpio, or K2, and so a brother can pull a debilitated Moon out. I think I have a debilitated Moon, and I think I really leaned on my older brother very heavily when I was growing up to kind of give me the confidence to pull me out of this deep emotional funk that I was in when I was a child. So sometimes you have to recommend that people with a debilitated Moon get in touch with their brothers and their siblings and make peace with them to kind of pull them out of that debilitation. Mars gets debilitated in Cancer, so they need to reconnect with their mother, but it's a very hard thing to do because naturally they're going to be angry toward their mother. They need to kind of heal their relationship with their mother to pull the Mars out of debilitation. Mercury debilitated is in Pisces, owned by Jupiter, so it needs a strong Jupiter um, um, figure to pull them out. So they need a guru or they need children to pull them out. So I've got a client with a debilitated Mercury in Pisces. It's the ascendant lord. He's Virgo rising, and it's a very difficult. It's right about 15 or 16 degrees. It's a very kind of difficult chart, and he doesn't have a guru, and his children somehow keep him going. But you can see how the recommendation for somebody with a debilitated Mercury like that would be you need to get a guru to pull you out of that energy. Jupiter debilitation occurs in Capricorn, right, which is owned by Saturn. So we need an elder, a mentor, or a father. Saturn is again another karaka for father, to pull us out of that problem energy. Venus gets debilitated in Virgo, which is owned by Mercury. Mercury, the karaka, is friend. So we need friends to kind of pull us out of our relationship issues, or relatives to kind of be there to support us when we're having relationship issues, which is kind of the natural things that happen, and that pulls the Venus out of debilitation. And Saturn is debilitated in Aries, so it needs Mars. It needs a brother figure, or a military figure, or a military mentor, or a leader, to kind of pull them out of their funk. Okay. I'm gonna. I've been talking a lot, and I still have more material to cover. For those of you who know me, I do go through a lot of examples in our classes. I go over students' charts in class, but the first class, I always have a lot of expositional material to present, and it's hard for me to do too many examples, otherwise I never get through the expositional material. But I will take a question. Julie has a question. I'm going to unmute you, Julie. Hi, Julie. You had a question.
Oh, yes, I had a lot of comments and questions. I think, let's see, the last one that came up, something just came up right now when you were talking about Mars debilitated in Cancer, needs a strong moon or mother to pull it up. You said something last week at the end of the class that I had a different interpretation of in a person's chart, where she has in the D9 a debilitated Mars that was exchanging with in the second house that was exchanging with the moon in Aries in the 11th house, and I thought that was good.
It is
And
good. It is good.
you had said something last week, though, that this kind of exchange, I believe, was not good. So I had a question that it prompted it when you were talking about Mars debilitation just now, because I thought that was fabulous. And she's in Mars moon right now, and I'm predicting good things for her. And I thought, oh my God, I need to talk to Barry because you said something bad about it. And I thought this is going to be good for her with money. And actually, it's the DK, the moon, that she's running the sub period of, which only comes around once in a blue moon, you might say. And it is, I think it's good for her to meet somebody and, somebody financial, and she's already well off, from the family financially. So I think it's a good period. But that was one thing.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, Julie. I mean, and again, sometimes there's so much going on in these classes, I may have missed that. A Parivartana yoga between the 2nd and the 11th is generally good. But don't forget, the 2nd and the 11th is kind of the 6th from the 6th, so it's a health house. And the 2nd house is a Marka house. So 2nd and 11th exchanges, if you pull up Alan Anand's book, Parivartana Yogas, it's a little bit of a neutral, and then if the planets have some loss of dignity, then you don't get the full result of that exchange, So
I didn't know you wrote a book, Alan Anand, on Parivartana Yoga. So he was in my class with Hart Defoe. How interesting.
Yeah, Alan has been quite a writer, and he's actually quite a brilliant man.
Yes, he sent me for my birthday. He sent me one of his mystery books, but I didn't know he did a book like that. So thank you for that.
He just wrote a book on Kalasarpa Yoga, which I haven't bought yet, and he looked at 300 charts on Kalasarpa Yoga. So, Alan has done a lot of case studies with Parivartana Yogas. And I would go there, but in general, I haven't been teaching yogas because I think they're so problematic and they get over and misinterpreted. But in general, with yogas, if the planets lack dignity or have bad aspects, then the yoga may not fully manifest. Or if it does manifest.
That reminder, Barry, because the person whose chart I've been looking at for over a year is experiencing some weakness. But I went to Ashtaka Varga, and she does have a weak Ashtaka Varga for most of the Mars. It never gets above 4, which is her Dasha Lord. And it has often asked me, about health and feeling, kind of run down and weak. So your comments of the 11th house as being a health house, is it the 11th Lord or the 11th house? Can you say more about what you just said about the 11th house?
Well, the 11th house, sometimes if you pick up my class on Secret of the Houses, or read my articles, the 11th house, sometimes gets wonderfully thrown into this kind of place of it's the house of gains. Everything's always wonderful in the 11th house.
Right.
But that's kind of like that's kind of like grade school Jyotish, because nothing's ever like that. The 11th house is the 6th from the 6th. So when you're looking at health problems, you actually have to look at the 6th and the 11th, and the 11th house lord is kind of a little bit like the 6th house lord. It can cause health problems. So you have to kind of lump the 11th and the 6th houses together in the same category, and all the things that we have to do for the 11th house, and for the 6th house, which is discipline and showing up and being disciplined, are often applied to the 11th house also because of that 6th from the 6th. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Barry. And I just wanted to say that in your chart, your example, when you were talking about Jupiter Rahu, yes, we did see the difference with the Jupiter, but I noticed that in your main chart and in your D9, the Rahu went 7 away. So I thought, well, maybe that's really not that bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's what I was just pointing out to you. We tend, when we learn basic Jyotish, which we have to learn, we learn some basic rules. How far are the Dasha Lord, and the Bhukti Lord from each other in the D1 chart? And if it's not 3, 6, 9, or 12, or 3, 6, 8, or 12, then we say, okay, it's going to be a good period. But then you have to qualify in the Navamsha chart with the principles that we learned in lesson 3 about Bhava Suchika. And the more I study that Bhava Suchika stuff and start looking at it, it's everything. It's everything. And the example that we used in our class, in our third class, was there's this multi-billionaire who in the auto industry, and if you look at his Varga chart, it's a 12th house period. And there's no way you would have predicted that he was going to become a multimillionaire or multi-billionaire during this period. And then when you look at the Bhava Suchika, it transposes 5 houses, and then you look at the Varga charts, and it's like, wow. So, you
Maybe
always
he's making the cars overseas.
Yeah, right. I don't think he was. It was an Indian auto magnate. And I've got the chart if you want to review lesson 3 and look at the slideshow. But I think it's just an incredible example of why we have to use Bhava Suchika in trying to decide if something's going to be good or bad. And that's why there's so many advanced rules in Jyotish. To get really good predictions, you have to look at so many things. Anyway, great questions, Julie. I've got 2 more questions
One
here.
more thing, Barry. On the child chart, whose chart you didn't have, I wondered in that example, and maybe this is obvious, but you've made 2 opposing statements that I won't nitpick about, but but I wondered in the child chart if it allowed for the children or not when it was debilitated in the subchart, when it was good in the main chart.
Well, that's the whole point, is that sometimes things are promised in the Rashi chart, and if you look, people who don't look at the Varga charts and they say, oh, this looks great for children, and then and then you look at all these other factors in the D charts. Like I think in the chart, which again I somehow lost, Jupiter was also was the Karaka was debilitated in Capricorn, so that was one thing. And then the Lord of the 5th house was Jupiter, and the Lord of the 5th house was Marna Karkastana. There were a bunch of other offsetting things for it. So
Yeah.
I'll have to dig up that chart. I don't have it at the moment. I do want to. We have a guest. Sandeep has a question, and I wanted to answer his question. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Sandeep, I just unmuted you. I'm sorry. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much, Barry, for allowing me. Well, actually, I have like 5 questions. I don't know if you would allow me to ask them, but do you want me to run all the questions at once or ask you one after another?
Okay. I'll try, because I want to get through some other material. I'll take one question. You can email the other questions to me, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, so you were discussing about how, let's say, for example, Saturn is in Aries, let's say in a Varga chart, and a Mars person can take them out. I was wondering how it is about a planet which is in Maranakaraka Sana. So let's say Venus is completely smashed in, let's say, 6th house in a particular D chart. What would be the scenario in this case to take the Venus out of that and the ill effects of that? That is the first question, actually.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how much it relates to this talk, but I usually remedies for Marna Karkastana placements, you have to go to the Karaka, and then you have to strengthen the Karaka. So the Karaka for the 6th house is Mars or Saturn, and basically Venus in the 6th house kind of is going to have problems with, the 6th house is always about discipline, and if you don't have any discipline about your sexuality, then you get sick a lot, and so usually the remedy for a Mark-Karna Sthana planet is going to be the Karaka uh, of the house involved. In this case, it'd be Mars or Saturn, and both of those both of those always teach us discipline. So usually Venus in the sixth house usually has to kind of have discipline around sexual activity or sensual activity. Otherwise, it's not going to to get sick.
Okay. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does to an extent. If I can just, but for now, this suffices. The second question I wanted to ask, you mentioned a malefic planet in the ascendant of a D chart would, let's say, hamper that chart. But what about if a malefic is exalted? So let's say in a D10 chart, Rahu is exalted in, let's say, Gemini. So how, or Saturn in Libra in any D10 chart or any Varga charts, how
Okay,
do
good.
you think that will happen?
Yeah, good question. I did have that in my notes, and I probably didn't go over it. Yes, if a planet is in its own sign or exalted, it won't be a problem.
Audible?
It won't be a problem. So obviously, if you have Saturn exalted in Libra in the first house of any D chart, then it's not going to cause the kind of problems you would have if you had just a regular malefic in there. Yeah.
Okay.
And so own sign and exalted always kind of will take precedence over a problematic malefic influence. Good question. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Sandeep. Unfortunately, I've got other people in the class, but I will if you email me the other questions, I will answer them. Thank you.
Sure.
Mohini, you had a question? I see. You can unmute yourself, Mohini. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. That's really interesting remedial information you've given there today. So I appreciate that. Just wanted to ask you really quickly. I guess it's kind of like Sandeep's question: is if the Lord is of a malefic house, do you still appropriate in that way? Do you know what I mean? So
No, I'm not sure. I mean,
yeah. So I guess it's just tangentially in reference to what he.
the thing is, you have to remember with malefics, sometimes they get bad press. If you listened to my tape yesterday on my transit class yesterday, malefics to me are kind of like difficult high school coaches that are kind of like pushing you really hard to be a better person. They create problems, and they're not a lot of fun, but ultimately they do create something good. So I think in general we have to remember that malefics, we shouldn't think of things as good or bad. I mean, they're maybe malefics are uncomfortable to go through their energies, but they ultimately are pushing you to be a better person. Even in extreme situations where they cause accidents and illness, it's because you need to wake up about some area of your life that you're not looking at.
For sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers you, but I think the question is.
That was the part A, but a very quick part B. Do you think that, for example, would you use that methodology to prescribe gems to a client?
My remedy class has a whole 2-hour lesson on gems, and there are all these kind of complicated rules about prescribing gems. I don't like prescribing gems for malefic house ownerships ever. I only like prescribing gems for the first, for Yogacaraka planets and for the lords of the first, fifth and the ninth houses, and then there's still all these funny qualifications. I mean, I tend to use gem elixirs because gems are too expensive.
Yeah, Because sometimes you stumble across somebody who's like into their bling, right? So you're like, okay, well then, you're trying to figure out what kind of gem or what kind of, you know, what jewel will work for them, right? And so, yeah, I just thought I'd ask real quick on that. But thank you, that was excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, my basic rule with gem therapy is if the ascendant lord is debilitated, like let's say you have Mercury, you have a Virgo rising chart, and they've got Mercury in Pisces, then there's a constant problem all their life about with health issues and mental clarity issues and
Right.
mental stability issues. Then absolutely give them an emerald, because you want to, you always want to strengthen the first lord. The debilitated first lord, I always want to give a gem because it's a long-term influence.
Sure.
But that's just my preference. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to continue with the lecture. We've got about 15 minutes left. So we talked about the sun. So we also want to look at the moon and the divisional charts. And again, the sun and the moon are just the two most important planets, for everything. And we forget that so often. I don't know how that ever happened, but that's why, if you went to some of my other classes, we have a whole lesson on sun charts and we have a whole lesson on moon charts, because they're the basis of everything. And we forget them. So the moon chart, the moon in the divisional chart is very important. Something we haven't talked about in Varga 1, but we need to start looking at it. So, for example, a debilitated moon in the D9 chart may ruin a person's life and there'll be no marriage. I mean, that's how important it is. You don't want debilitated moons in the Varga charts, because they either we have to work 3 times as hard to make something happen, or it just doesn't happen. So, debilitated moon is very important in all the Varga charts. And I gave an example there. We also don't want moon in the 8th house. Moon in the 8th house is Marika Karakastana. Moon in the 8th house gets stuck. It can't express its emotions. It gets way too kind of caught up in mental inward nonsense, and it causes deep suffering. So you don't want moon in the 8th house in any of the D charts, because it causes huge suffering and lack of happiness in the chart. You also don't want moon in the 6th, 8th, or the 12th in any of the D charts, or conjunct the Saturn. We generally don't like planets in the 6th or the 8th or the 12th house in Varga charts, but particularly moon conjunct Saturn can be particularly problematic, and can create dangers from enemies. Moon in the 8th house in the D30, which when we study the D30 is particularly bad for disease and illness. Again, the 8th house is going to be, the 6th and the 8th houses are the key houses to look at in the D30 chart, and you want to make sure that the moon is not in the 8th house in the D30, because otherwise you need to do serious remedial energies for a moon period that would come up. So bottom line, watch moon in Scorpio in divisional charts. We like moon in Libra, Taurus, Cancer, Pisces, Sagittarius. We don't like moon in Capricorn, Aries, Scorpio, Virgo. And Virgo is one of those funny signs of the zodiac. And if you review the points in the slideshow, Virgo is is way too perfectionistic. It's a 6th house, so it's always kind of causing potential health problems if we don't do things right. And so Virgo is not a great place to have planets in general. Again, you don't want moon afflicted by malefics in bad houses. We also have to watch dispositors. One of my classes upcoming, we're going to have a whole 3 or 4 hours on dispositors, because we forget about them. So if let's say you get moon in the 4th house in Aries, so you think, oh, Digbala, great placement. But then the dispositor Mars is in Cancer, and it's in the 8th house, and so suddenly that wonderful moon that looks so wonderful in the 4th house is controlled by Mars in the 8th in Cancer. So you always have to remember the dispositors, and that also applies to divisional charts. If the dispositor is badly afflicted, has bad dignity, or in a bad house, then it can't do a lot of good. I'm teaching my my fundamental class on transits, and it's like landlords and tenants. If I always use this analogy. I started it when I was first teaching Jyotish. If you're renting a property and and the property is actually nice, like it said, you've got dignity there. It's a nice property, but the landlord is in the 12th house, and he's debilitated. He's in jail. He when you call him to get something fixed, he doesn't answer. He can't control the property. So always remember your dispositors in that way with landlords and tenants, because if the landlord is not happy, if he's in jail, if he's being attacked by Saturn and Mars and Ketu, he's just not going to fix your house. So moon charts and psychology. There are 16 types of the mind as suggested by the D16 chart, and we'll go over that when we study the D16 chart and related to the tithis and the deities. It's quite fascinating. But the moon sign in any divisional chart will reveal the mental temperament toward that area of life. So again, remember your signs. Moon in Aquarius in the D9 chart may give a stern, cold, and philosophical attitude toward relationships. So again, moon is going to show emotional temperament. If it's in Aquarius in the D9 chart, translate that. Stern, cold, philosophical attitude toward relationship. Moon in Cancer in the D7 chart, caring and loving attitude toward children, right? D7 is about children. Moon in Cancer is nurturing. It represents mother and mother divine. Wonderful placement. Moon in Aries in D10. Well, it's going to make you daring and impulsive in your profession. Again, Moon in Aries is going to give you that courage to kind of move forward in your career. It's a good placement. So you can look at the mental state of the moon and the sign quality, and you can go back to my signal cheat chart, and you can go back to my books to come up with keywords to kind of translate that. And there's infinite number of possibilities with this, but moon and psychology in the D chart is very important. We talked about we don't like moon in the 8th house. We don't like moon conjunct Ketu or Mars in the D charts. Too much sadness. Moon and Saturn, sadness, happiness, bad health, things like that. So look at moon conjunctions in the D charts because they're going to create problems. You don't want moon conjunct malefics in the D charts. Atmakaraka, we want to end with Atmakaraka today. Atmakaraka, is the planet with the highest number of degrees, and it shows the karma of this incarnation and why we have to suffer in this life. And it shows the soul's deepest karma in any division. So the Atmakaraka is very important in the Varga charts, and we have to look at it because it actually represents kind of the deep karmic suffering and purpose in this lifetime. And when it shows up in a Varga chart in a bad place, then it will kind of ruin that Varga and show the deep pain in that Varga. So for example, Saturn Atmakaraka is about not creating pain and suffering for others, but it's because we've gone through a lot of pain and suffering in our own life, we have the strength to help others, and we're able to accept other people's pain. I know this firsthand because I have Saturn Atmakaraka in the 12th. So the basic lessons of Atmakaraka, just to review them. So if the sun has the highest number of degrees in your chart, then we have to learn humility and overcoming pride and self-importance. So put sun in the D10 chart as the Atmakaraka, put it in, let's say, the 12th house, particularly a deep lesson about humility and service and overcoming pride and self-importance, because you have to learn how to kind of work with your in management and not belittle people. So you can see how the Atmakaraka sun might function in the D10 chart, which is so connected to status and career. Moon Atmakaraka, the need to learn compassion and sensitivity for others, right? And put that into maybe the D7 chart, Karaka for Moon, put it in the wrong house with bad dignity there, and you could see how the major lessons involving being passionate, caring, sensitive parent would manifest. Mars Atmakaraka needs to practice nonviolence, both verbally and physically. Usually, you know, it ends up being verbally that people have problems with it. But you know, put it in the D3 chart connected to brothers and siblings, and who naturally want to fight. You could see how, you know, put it in the wrong house there, connected to conjunct malefics or something, and you can have, you can see have a major conflagration. Mercury Atmakaraka is about speaking the truth and communicating only that which is uplifting to others. And so, you know, the media, the U.S. media now, which is all about tearing down people, is, you know, most of them probably have Mercury Atmakaraka because they're doing the exact opposite of what they need to do. But you know, you know, think about that in a Varga chart. Put it in the wrong in a bad place in the Varga chart. You can see how deep lessons come out about that. Jupiter Atmakaraka has to assume the role of protector and teacher, and usually these people have trouble teaching, and so you have to make sure that Jupiter Atmakaraka does teach. Venus Atmakaraka has to learn how to control physical passion, excessive sensual experience, and master relationships. You know, definitely if you have Venus Atmakaraka in the D9 chart, badly placed like in Virgo or in the 12th house, you can see how it's just like a major accentuation of the life lesson. Put that in a Venus period, and you see all kinds of problems happening. Saturn Atmakaraka we went over. Rahu Atmakaraka has to learn how to, you know, because they have the karma of cheating others in past lives, they have to kind of deal with being deceived and cheated in this life, and being they have to learn how to be honest and straightforward in everything they do. And Rahu Atmakaraka can show up, you know, in, you know, think of it in a D10 chart, and you can see how ethical business relationships are really important. We went over the examples here. So the Atmakaraka lessons, you know, show that the suffering karma on the soul level, and it reveals our hidden weaknesses and flaws in this incarnation. So what people don't understand, you know, we always talk about Atmakaraka as king of the chart. It really, you know, the Atmakaraka governs the 1st and the 8th houses. So, and the self, it is the kind of it's the highest level of self in this incarnation. But it involves the 8th house lessons from past lives that we need to learn, and so we, you know, our whole goal in this incarnation is kind of learning our Atmakaraka lessons. And so when they manifest in the Varga charts in a difficult place, we have to kind of realize that Varga is going to particularly suffer and be a focal point for this incarnation. So, you know, it's very interesting. So like Mars Atmakaraka, you know, let's say you have Mars Atmakaraka debilitated in Cancer. Mars Atmakaraka in general kind of, especially if it were like debilitated, shows a dislike for conflicts and suppressed anger and may lack ambition. And so it needs to work on all those things. I mean, you have to force these debilitated Mars Atmakaraka people to kind of like fight for their rights, protect their territory, you know, let go of their anger when they're suppressing it, and, you know, get out there and be ambitious and make something happen. But it'll be really, really hard for them to do. Put that debilitated Mars Atmakaraka in the D10 chart, you know, and you'll see that you know, God, that is such a major lesson for them in this lifetime, and you have to advise them. So the Atmakaraka is very, very, very revealing in the D charts, and we'll have to look at all your examples. You know, the Atmakaraka teaches us that we mistake our Maya for the light of God that we truly are. So Atmakaraka always gets us caught up in Maya and illusion. You know, the Sun Atmakaraka thinks I'm a leader, I'm great, I'm the best, and in reality they need to learn how to kind of be humble and to lead by working with people and lead through example. I have a friend, it's the most amazing, brilliant person I know. He used to work for me. He's got Sun Atmakaraka in the 9th house, exalted in Aries, and he's the most difficult person in the world to work with, and he's way too proud, and he's got so much fire, he kind of burns everybody up. And I was one of the few people I ever fired because he was just always standing up to me and showing how smart he was. And here's an example, because he didn't know his Jyotish, that he actually needed to learn how to be humble and how to kind of like suppress his incredible talent and his ego, because he was burning people up and he still hasn't learned it. So that's the illusion of the Atmakaraka. The soul gets trapped by the illusion of exalted son Atmakaraka. I am great, I am great. But in reality, they have to learn how to be humble. Always look at the Atmakaraka, particularly in the D9 and the D60, which we did in the last course. We spent a lot of time on the Atmakaraka and the D9. And then rotating it, because there's, that's where we have 2-3 videotapes on it, because it's so important. The D60, we really should have spent more time looking at the Atmakaraka. So again, look at the Atmakaraka and all of your divisional charts. What Vargas have weakness? In other words, does the Atmakaraka get debilitated or afflicted in a particular Varga chart? Again, if it gets malefic, if it gets conjunct malefics, there's a lot of suffering in that area. So my Saturn Atmakaraka, if we look at my charts, my Saturn is my Atmakaraka. Saturn is debilitated in my D7 chart, so I have no children. Again, maybe I've been deprived of children because maybe I didn't do a good job in the last lifetime, and that's what I think I understand. Or maybe I didn't want children because I wanted to develop. My students are my children now. But I have an exalted Atmakaraka in D20, D30, and D27. And so I have to really think about interpreting that a little bit. And maybe when we do those charts, we'll remember to look at that. But I do have thoughts on that, but I don't want to, it's late and I want to take final questions. So look at the summary points. And we're out of time here, and I want to honor people who came here. Julie, does any, I'll stay a few minutes later for additional questions. I'll send you the full slideshow. Anybody who's watching the tape version of the course, I didn't get to the nodes. You can read the notes on that. We'll see if we can maybe start with that next week. The nodes obviously are very important in the Varga charts, because if you put them in the 1-7 axis in any Varga chart, they're going to create deep karma around those areas. And in the upper Varga charts, Rahu and Ketu get calculated in conjunction. It just means that there's a deep karmic energy wherever they fall in a D chart. And so that's, you have to always look at Rahu and Ketu in the divisional charts. Ketu in the D charts creates suffering and pain and cruelty unless it's exalted. Whatever. So anyway, for those of you who are watching this on tape, if you want to take my Varga 1 class, you can write me. If you want to take sections of my Varga 1 class, you're welcome to. They're split into sections now. One is on the Vamsha chart, one is on career in very great detail. There's about 9 tapes on each of those with the additional tips that I gave out for, as part of the class. If you want to come join Varga 2 class, I can send you. I'll send you the first 3 tapes of the Varga 1 class to catch up with the basic principles of Varga. You can watch one of those tapes on YouTube, and if you need help with payments, you can do that. So I'm going to open up the mic to any final questions. Again, for those of you who've taken my classes, the first class always ends up being kind of a whirlwind of overview information that's a little overwhelming. And for those of you who've taken classes with me, we do spend a lot of time looking at your charts and going through examples and looking at celebrity charts. Next week, I think we're still going to do kind of an overview integration class, doing case studies and going over some more cookbook principles, because I think we really have to get our deep principles down for looking at Vargas in general and be really clear on our cookbook from going from the D1 chart to a D chart, and then I think we need to practice that before we move forward with all these new D charts. So that's where we're at. for those of you who are on Jyotish overload, I'm sorry I talk so quickly, and many of you have attracted a really great group of smart students. I know many of you can follow me, but for those of you who are not following me, I do apologize if I've gone too quickly. But you are welcome to ask any questions. Some of you who came late, Victoria, I'm sorry, you did get muted. Sundar, you did get muted. Sandeep is so everybody's unmuted if you have a question. Danny, sorry, you were muted the whole class. So everybody can get on the mic and ask questions now, one at a time if you need them.
Okay, Barry, shall I go ahead?
If no one else has a question, yes, you can go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to know that you have mentioned earlier in the class that if the Rashi chart does not promise something, and if the D chart promises something, so it will be like a promise. But I mean, what I'm basically trying to ask, let's say in the Rashi chart, a planet is in debility, and it is not promising something, and it is, let's say, blocked. But the same planet is in exalted form in the D chart, so let's say Navamsha. So isn't it going to cause a Nicha Bhanga Rajya Yoga? I mean, what I have learned with my own study is that the Navamsha chart for all matters and purposes has the final say. So if a Navamsha chart is saying something, let's say about marriage, it is definitely going to happen, even if the Rashi chart does not show it, which is quite opposite of what you have said so far, if I'm not wrong. That is the first one. The second, which is a small one. Sorry?
Let me answer that now while I remember that before we go
Yes.
on to the next question. So you're absolutely right. You know, in our lessons on the Navamsha chart, we did. There are always exceptions in Jyotish. For the most part, the Navamsha chart can bring results kind of, I think, later in life is what I've always talked about. That could particularly and when people get married, sometimes when people do get married, they become their Navamsha chart, and the fruits and the positive things in that Navamsha chart do manifest. I think the Navamsha chart, the D60 and the D9 chart, are kind of exceptions to the general Varga rules because they're kind of separate. They have separate kind of rules within themselves. But you're absolutely right, Sandeep. Thank you for bringing that out.
The second question was about the sign of Aquarius. Now, you also mentioned that Scorpio and Aquarius are quite karmic signs, but also Aquarius is a sign which does behave in a way like Cancer. So, let's say Jupiter in a D chart in Aquarius can behave as an exalted Jupiter. Any comments about that? Because on one hand, it would be behaving as an exalted Jupiter. On the other hand, there is this karmic things associated for being in the sign of Aquarius. So, how let's say how are they going to manifest in terms of materialistic things, let's say?
Yeah, now Kay and Rao used to really like Jupiter in Aquarius because it gave Jupiter really kind of intellectual prowess and wisdom. So I think there are always lots of exceptions. Sanjay Roth is kind of very fond of teaching about deep karmic problems in Aquarius. I mean, nothing is ever totally, cut in stone. I mean, you certainly, if the Lord, if Rahu is exalted in Gemini, or Rahu's in Aquarius, or Rahu's in Virgo, or and if Saturn's very strong in the chart, if the dispositor of Aquarius is very powerful, Aquarius can be a very powerful sign and may not have a lot of karmic baggage. And if it finds its higher humanitarian values in service, um, um, the problem with Aquarius often is, because it's co-ruled by Rahu, and Rahu just has a lot of karmic baggage around desires, Aquarius often gets pulled down. But there are always exceptions. And Jupiter in Aquarius is wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, that. And I mean, I have one more question, but I'm stopping now. If somebody else has any question, or else I will ask.
Okay, let's see if somebody else has a question. The mics are open. I think all of you are unmuted. You're all in Jyotish overload. I know I am. Mohini, you have a question? No. Okay, you're all ready to go to. You all want to take a break. Okay, so Dave, I'll take your last question. Thank you.
Okay, my last question was it's kind of a mixed thing actually because I mean it's actually from my chart. I did not do not want to bring up my chart, but it's actually related to my chart. My Atmakarak and my Lagna Lord is Mercury. It is in Parivartana with Jupiter because my Mercury is in Pisces and it is in Parivartana with Jupiter. And there are like lots of planets associated with Mercury. So like Saturn, Ketu associated with Mercury and Rahu is associated with Jupiter. So it's kind of a complex situation. I just wanted to know how you are going to deal with this kind of situation.
Yeah, because I can't see your chart and I can't look at all the subtle influences, I don't have any opinion on it. Uh, I think you kind of usually. I was uh, this spring I may teach a new class called Secrets of the Masters, where I want to go into like really deep material, where you get kind of really advanced knowledge on very complex issues. And I'm thinking of doing new lessons on Atmakaraka in that class because uh, it does get it's very very important. It's the purpose of this incarnation, and you have to really understand it deeply. But it's so complex. You have to look at so many influences.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really I'm trying to understand that part. I mean, I still have not got any answers to that. So even if Mercury, let's say, is not Atmakarka, let's say just as a planet and let's say as an ascendant lord, it's debilitated, but the debility is being cancelled, and also there is a parivartana because Jupiter is in Virgo, so it's they are in the 612 axis in my D9 chart. In that case, if we take only this case, how will it manifest? Because the Lagna Lord, the Nicha Bhanga is getting cancelled, but it is Nicha, but it is getting cancelled. So how is it going to manifest? So the best part are going to come after marriage. So earlier part is going to be suffering, or is it going to be a normal Nicha Bhanga type situation, like you are going to have a fall and then you are going to have a rise? How it's going to go?
Yeah, I have a lesson on Ichabanga in my transit class in a couple of weeks. It's um, um, the general rule with Nichabanga is that and most debilitations do get canceled because there's so many rules for canceling them. Is that the person has the problem, but they have the support to get through the problem. So to me, the debilitated Mercury has way too active a mind, maybe too caught up in spirituality for Virgo rising, and may not be able to kind of be practical and down to earth in business affairs. And the exchange of houses between the first and the seventh, um, it's a Boudica situation. So to me, it suggests really kind of deep karmic relationship karma. Are you married or are you not
No,
married?
no, I'm not married. I just have had only one relation, and it was a disaster.
Right.
So
Okay.
just because.
So with the Atmakaraka being connected to that 1-7 axis, obviously, one of your deepest karmic um, goals in life is getting better at relationships. And so the things that you're not good at, debilitated planets have to work through to study at what they're not good at. So you need to take a lot of relationship seminars and do a lot of relationship books and get a lot of relationship coaching if you want to get married and be successful. And that maybe your whole purpose in this lifetime is working on something that's very hard to do.
Thank you. But it's actually not 1-7. It's actually 6-12 in the
Oh, it's
D9.
6-12. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So it's 6-12. So did you say you're Libra rising?
Yes, I'm Libra rising in D9. I'm Gemini in D1 and Libra rising in D9.
So are you talking about the fiery Varga in D9?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm having trouble visualizing it, so I'm going to I'm going to table the answer. Me to I'd like to see it visually to really kind of work on it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Um, okay, so now that you're on all nutrition overload, I'm going to suggest that you all um, go take a walk, even though it's pretty hard. It's like -3 here or something like that. If you're in a good climate, go take a walk, go hug a tree, do something to get out of your head, do some yoga to get into your bodies. And those of you who are continuing in the class next week, I'll send you the slideshow. For those of you who are not in the class, you can request the slideshow from me and I'll translate it so you can go over the points. Those of you who would like to continue studying with me, if you haven't enrolled in Varga 2, email me if you need any special situations. If you haven't taken Varga 1 and you'd like to be in Varga 1, also email me and I can work up some situations for you. So again, looking very forward to seeing you all again. Those of you who are in the class, we'll see you next week. Those of you who are completing Varga 1 and not continuing, it's been an honor serving you and being here with you. And I'm sure we'll meet again somewhere on the Jyotish trails. So have a great weekend, and we'll rest of your weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Take care.
Namaste. Thank you, Barry.
Bye, Julie.
Bye-bye.